Good evening, Mr. Henderson. My name is Lamont Cole. I'm the chairman of the Police Chief Review Committee. The way we're going to conduct this interview, you're going to have 3 minutes for an opening statement. The committee members will ask a series of questions. We can ask up to 2. Each member may not ask 2 questions, but we can ask up to 2. You will have 2 minutes to respond to each question, and then 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Let me know when you're ready to begin.
I'm ready.
On you.
First, I want to say that I'm both honored and humbled to be in y'all's presence today, having the opportunity to interview for this. And I commend y'all for putting together this committee and allowing us to have the opportunity to come in front of you. I want to kind of introduce myself as a person, and then I'll go through my law enforcement experience real quick. I'm Tim Henderson. I've been married to my wife, Lori, for 33 years. I have 3 sons, Tyler, Tim Jr., and Josh. I have 5 grandkids, little Tyler, Matt, Maddie, TJ, and then baby Charlie, who's our granddaughter in heaven. And that's who I'm as an individual. I'm a grandfather, a father, and I'm a husband. As a police officer, I became a police officer in 1990 for no particular reason. I just needed a job, honestly, and I started working at the parish prison. Then I became really intrigued with the concept of doing this police work. I went to LSU Police for 5.5 years, and then I went to the city police in Baton Rouge, where I retired as a lieutenant at just about a little bit less than 25 years. After that, I was in retirement for about a year, and then I took the job as chief of police in Killian. And currently, I'm retired again, and I own a private investigative business and a consulting firm.
Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I see on your resume you have experience in 21st century policing.
Yes, sir.
Could you tell us which is the hardest one to implement that you've come across and why?
I think it's both hard and easy, so I'm going to tell you community policing, because we as officers have to understand the communities that we are policing. We have to understand the different challenges and needs of a particular community. And it could be a sub-segment of the city, and they may have different needs than maybe the outskirts of the city. So community policing, in my opinion, is probably one of the most challenging, because we have to get the people in the community to open up to us, but we also have to open up to them and let them see that we're human, have open dialogue with them, and that we're capable of, coming to a mutual agreement. That way we can find out what we need as far as solving crime and stuff like that. Because the community, I always say, we have few eyes, you have many. If the community's not involved, you're not going to have a functioning police department. You have to have community involvement in all aspects. So that would be my answer.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Anderson. So this is from category 11, possible questions for current BRPD candidates, which that seems to be the most recent one. But so given your experience in the various divisions here on your resume, Uniform Patrol Intelligence, Gun Crime Intelligence Center, Violent Crime Unit, Burglary, all these different areas, how did you or your division respond to the various difficulties and scandals that arose in BRPD during that time? I know street crimes was after, but narcotics was during that time. And did you implement, amend, propose any policies to try to make sure your unit functioned effectively?
Well, our unit was both committed to the task at hand, and we always had someone above us that we answered to. So we were pretty clear as to what we were doing and why we were doing it and how we were doing it. So we didn't really have to implement any additional safeguards. In my opinion, we pleased on our character, and we pleased to meet the needs and challenges of the community. But we had division commanders above us that had oversight. So I didn't see a real need for us to really implement anything, because we weren't in the situations that you're referring to.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Henderson.
Good evening.
How will you devise community outreach strategies that align with Baton Rouge's unique community fabric? And for the record, my question is coming from the community engagement category.
Could you please read the first portion of that again?
Absolutely. How will you devise community outreach strategies that align with Baton Rouge's unique community fabric?
All right. So in the outreach concept, we, as I mentioned earlier, we have to understand the culture of the areas that we're patrolling, and we need to devise plans that fit the specific needs of this area or this area compared to just an overall view of the whole city, because the whole city doesn't experience the same amount of violence, the same amount of, disproportionate financial situations. Some people are more impoverished. There are more impoverished area than others. And, those are some of the areas that maybe we need to spend a little more time. We need to make sure that the youth of today don't live by the concept that violence is respected. We need you to respect education. We need to, change the mindset of our youth right now. And I would focus a lot of attention on that. But you'd have to have a panel. You'd have to have community leaders tell us what is needed in order for us to come up with a good strategy. So it's going to take a little bit of work, forming committees and just talking to people and see what's working. If it's not working, then move on. If it's not working, we're going to go to the next strategy. Not everything works, unfortunately. You're welcome.
Mr. Henderson, good afternoon. How you doing?
Good, sir.
What is the biggest thing or experience that you've done previously that makes you the most qualified for this particular job?
I think the biggest thing is I care more than anything, and I probably have cared too much over the years. When I left BRPD, when I retired, I had a little over 3,000 hours of leave built up because I didn't take off a lot. I felt an obligation to the city, to my squad, and to the other people in the community. So I think my compassion for the community, my understanding of the community, not in a community policing concept, but policing your communities. You need to understand and be able to engage with people of different races, sexes, creeds. So I think that would be my answer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. What does your first 100 days look like? Rank the top 5 priorities in your process for accomplishing them.
So my first 100 days, we're going to look at efficiency and effectiveness of the department right now. And when I was chief in Killian, that's the first thing that I looked at. We need to know what resources we have. We need to know how efficient and effective everything is that we're doing. Next, I'm going to address the violence. The city of Baton Rouge has had a decrease in violence, and it's noticeable. And me as a former intelligence operative, I understand the dynamics of what's going on. So I can see the trends coming down. And so something's working right now that hadn't worked in the last 2 or 3 years. I would increase training in many different aspects, including pursuits, including de-escalation, things like that. And one of the most important things is, you have to hit the ground running if the chief, and I already have experience in the department, so I don't have to be told what to do. I just kind of have to be briefed on certain things. So within that first 100 days, the most immediate thing I'm going to do is develop a strategy to get us through October, November, December. Well, we're in November now, November, December, January, which typically are some of the most violent times as far as homicides, domestic abuse, and armed robbery type stuff. So we have to devise a plan immediately to make sure that we are addressing those situations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Henderson.
Good evening.
I'm a member of Together Baton Rouge, and one of the issues that's important to us is developing civilian oversight. So I'd like to know what you understand about civilian oversight and how you might include that in your administration.
Well, I like to sit up here and tell you that I know a lot about it, but I don't. But the things that I believe as far as civilian oversight is that as long as it's not dictating policy and it's just oversight, I have no problem with it. The cloak and dagger days are over. The police department needs to be open. People use the word transparent. It's overutilized and it's overused and underutilized. The word transparency doesn't mean a lot to people anymore. So we want you or a committee like this to come in and help us when we do our policy review, because we'll review every policy when I become chief. And we'll show you as a civilian what we're doing and why we're doing it. So I believe that there has to be a place for that oversight. It just can't be in a situation where y'all are doling out discipline and stuff like that. I feel like you should be able to review the disciplinary process, but if you don't understand civil service, if you don't understand the police officer Bill of Rights, then it's kind of hard to include you in something like that. But we want you to know what we're doing and why we're doing it. And that's a guarantee I'll give you as chief of police. My door will never be closed to anybody in the community that wants to know what's going on. You're welcome.
What would you describe as the most important quality in the police chief in Baton Rouge?
I think the word consistency, but I'll have to say fairness also. You have to be consistent as a chief. You have to have the men and women of the police department respect you. And whenever you're doling out discipline, for instance, you have to make sure that you're doing it fair and impartial and that one person's not being treated different than the other. You have to let the community understand that you, as the chief of police, understand what's going on, and you have to be fair to them. You have to open your heart and acknowledge that there are issues that the police department and the community are dealing with and some negative things in the news right now. So I think that would be my answer, the fairness part.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Henderson.
Good evening.
What is your background? This is from Leadership, Culture, and Accountability. What is your background and experience in working with the police unions? I understand there's at least two, maybe three.
Well,
do you see avenues for improving relations while continuing to hold officers accountable?
Okay, so there's three different police unions. There's the Fraternal Order of Police, there's Magnolia, and then there's the Local 237. The Local 237 is the bargaining agent. The other two have they do not have the ability to bargain on behalf of the police officers. And the body of the police department voted on this some years ago, probably 15 or more. The FOP tried to come in to be the bargaining agent. So they're really the only ones, the Local 237 is really the only ones who can sit at the bargaining table, if you will. But we have to be open to the Magnolia and the Fraternal Order of Police, because they have a segment of the people within the department that might necessarily want to be in the Local 237, but they want the safeguards of a union. So I've never had a problem working with the union. Labor needs to understand their role. They need to ensure that they're looking out for the well-being of their officers, that they're treated fairly, and that when it comes to monetary issues and stuff, that they're bargaining, but they should never be involved in the day-to-day operation of a police department. And I think sometimes unions kind of misinterpret their role. So I was a union member for almost 25 years. The day I left, they still owe me a watch. So if they're listening, Brandon O'Neill, if you're listening, I still need a watch. So there'll be no problems with the union. I've always had a good relationship with them. I've stood the picket line with them when we were trying to get money in 2000. It was the informational picket because police can't, do anything more than informational picket. But, the union's necessary and there'll be no problems there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. My question comes from standards and strategies. Please discuss with us any new ideas you have for violence reduction in our community.
Violence reduction in the community starts with intelligence. You have to have a department that's willing to look at the intelligence, whether it be human intelligence or wherever you get the intelligence from, license plate readers, from cameras. You have to be able to implement those strategies and use what you learn in the intelligence to map out a direction for your department. So my whole, if I am selected as chief of police, most everything is going to be based on intelligence data. So that would be the thing that I would say. We need human intelligence, and we need every other kind of intelligence. We need social media. We make a lot of cases on social media, believe it or not. So that would be my answer to that.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you.
So I've just got one more question for you, Mr. Henderson. So you talked, I believe it was in response to Mr. Cole's question about improving training on things like pursuits this is from Category 8, Data Technology and Transparency. But that question about pursuits, I know that there's some new technology there. There's also new technology in surveillance. And given that you are a licensed private investigator now, I assume that you encounter these technologies a lot. So are there any nascent practices or technologies that you think BRPD could embrace to achieve its mission of protecting and serving? And how would you balance the needs of law enforcement with maybe the privacy interests of citizens?
But not about pursuits.
Any of the above,
Okay.
I guess.
Well, so one thing I wanted to do when I was chief in Killian, and we didn't have the resources, and I don't know if Baton Rouge has it, but we'll look for grant money. There is a system set up. It's a drone system that you can put an address in, you can type it in, and you can deploy the drone. So my father was killed in a police pursuit in Baton Rouge in 1989, just a few months before me becoming a police officer. So I know the tragedy involved in police pursuits. You have to have police pursuits, but it has to be for something egregious. Years ago, we chased everybody, and those days, they should be in the past. We should chase them only if whatever they have done leads us to believe that they have to be captured as a safeguard to the citizens. We don't want them running loose. So that would be one thing I would look at, that drone, because the drone can follow them, obviously, and it can give us updated pictures and stuff. I don't know all the technology involved in it, but the cameras, I want a camera everywhere. There's big police departments in London. They got cameras everywhere. We're not trying to infringe on anybody's right, but every time you step out into a public environment, I'm looking around, there's probably 10 or 15 cameras pointed toward me. It's just a fact of life. The cameras are out there. So we're not trying to invade any privacy. If you have cameras at your house and you want to give us access to them, by all means, only give us access to the data that shows a crime or something else. We don't care if your dog was barking and having a good time. We just care about the crime. So we're not going to infringe on anybody's rights. We're going to make sure that everybody that gives us this information gives it to us freely. But the city needs to invest in more cameras everywhere.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Henderson, what is your plan, or what are your plans for addressing the off-duty employment policy to ensure the city's security needs are prioritized?
Well, extra duty and overtime is a privilege. It's not guaranteed. Your job is to patrol the city or whatever your division is to affect a change in crime. You try to influence crime. When Chief Murphy Paul, when I was in the intelligence division, he once spoke of us as being violence interrupters, and that's what we need to do. So our primary objective is to be a police officer and work within the confines of your scope of duty. That should never interfere with, extra duty should never interfere with it. Now, extra duty is something that I raised my kids on. I've been married 33 years to my wife, right? I was able to give my kids more than I would have been able to give them because Baton Rouge wasn't paying a lot when I came. We didn't come for the money when I came. We came for the benefits. We came for the job itself. So right now, I believe you can work 16 hours. So 10 of that's going to be during the course of your regular duty, and then another 6 I don't really think that it's really a big factor. I don't see an issue there, honestly. You know, if you are doing your job and then you work extra duty, I don't really see that there's a really big issue. Not that I've seen or heard about. So I really probably wouldn't try to manage that right now. You know, as long as officers are doing their job, what they do secondarily, you know, to enhance their ability to provide for their family, you know, we don't want to stop them from doing that.
Thank you.
Mr. Henderson, we know that policing is a difficult job and comes with mental health challenges. Right. So can you talk a little bit about officer wellness, well-being, how you might address mental health challenges that officers face, you know, during their job?
Well, the first thing I would do if I was chief of police is I would make these districts a little more friendly to the officers. I would have and they're really antiquated, all the areas that some of these buildings they was here way before me. So I would try to make an area where they can have roll call, where they can get their assignments, but also just a common area for them to be able to relax a little bit and debrief, because uniform patrol officers specifically, they encounter everything. Everything's an unknown variable to them. Every time they go to a call, something unique is going to happen. And if they're put under stressors that maybe they're not ready to deal with, or they see that they can't deal with it, then we need to make sure we debrief. If we have a major incident, we need to make sure we debrief. When I first became a cop, you know, you sucked it up. You didn't really talk about things, and I'm sure some of the older people here kind of grew up the same way I did. Those days are gone. If you have emotions, you have to let them out, because if you don't deal with them now, you'll deal with them in 20 years, right? So at the end of your retirement, all this will kind of manifest itself. Certain things bother people more. One of my first calls that I went on when I was in Scotlandville, there was a deceased baby who was on the table. And for the life of me, when I walked in there, it was 6 o'clock in the morning, I was like, you know, kind of taken aback that the baby wasn't in a blanket or anything, and you know, stuff like that. And that's probably 27, 28 years ago. Stuff like that stays with you. So you need to talk about it. I have a good wife, and my wife has been a good sounding board, and she lets me, you know, tell her about stuff. But you also have to have friends. You have to have counselors. You know, BRPD have chaplains. They have peer support. We need to make it clear that it's not a macho thing anymore. That them days are gone, right? I tell my kids, all of them were cops. God gave us emotions for a reason, right? He gave us emotion for a reason. Sometimes you just have to cry. Sometimes you have to laugh. Sometimes you know, whatever the occasion would be. So I would say, and I've told people this that worked under my command, I fancy myself a tough guy, but I promise you, this is bothering me right now. So let's talk about it, right? I ain't embarrassed. We got to take the embarrassment the embarrassment component out of it. You're welcome.
No further questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Henderson, are there any other changes you would make if you were chief, specifically?
Well, for morale, I was a street cop most of my career. I worked in intelligence division, crime gun intelligence, but I always consider myself a street cop, even though I was in these other divisions, because I based my success on the community. And when I say street cop, I just mean the uniform patrol officer, right? But I was comfortable in the community, and I want the uniform patrol officers to not only be comfortable, but one thing I'll address is this. They're always treated, not intentionally, but they treated like lower class citizens within the police department. They don't have all the advantages that a lot of the detective divisions have. So one thing I'll do is prioritize them. I want to make sure they got good cars. I want to make sure they got good equipment, make sure they got good training. I want to make sure that their funds allocated for them to go to train in Jacksonville, Florida at a conference that they need, because they're really the first people that see everything. The detectives know what they're doing because they're a homicide detective, they're a burglary detective, armed robbery detective. So I think one of my strategies would would be to get those guys and girls happy, get them trained, make sure they're well equipped, and teach them how to talk to people, and teach them the community loves you. I don't care what anybody says. I was on these streets in every city, in every neighborhood in Baton Rouge. The community overall loves the police department, and the police department needs to love them back, and which they do. But we need to have open communication lines, and so that would be my priority, is to get the people of uniform patrol happy, because they're the face of the division. They're the face of the department. They're the ones that you see. You see the squad cars cruising around. They go to calls when they're at your house or my house, whatever. They're the face of the department. So that's one thing that I would focus on, in getting them all those things that I referred to.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My question relates again to your longstanding history working with BRPD. Throughout your career as an officer at BRPD, were there any policies or procedures that were modified or eliminated that should be re-implemented or reconsidered?
I don't recall. Well, there was a pursuit. Not a pursuit policy. I'm sorry. There was a rec policy that was really awful for years. And I think they changed that maybe in around 2005, 6, 7, or somewhere in that area. But I think Baton Rouge overall kind of reviews and keeps up with their policies, and they try to keep things with current trends. But like I mentioned earlier, I would go in and revisit every policy to make sure. And especially the pursuit policy. I know that's not part of your question, but the pursuit policy is so long, it's really hard to follow that policy and actually have a pursuit. We have to train our officers and make sure that they understand you have to stop here, you have to stop here. You have obligations when driving. So the pursuit policy is a big thing for me, obviously, because I mentioned to you that my father was killed. He was a civilian. He wasn't a cop, he was a civilian. And the bad guy hit his car and killed him and his friend. So we need to revisit things like that. But there's not really anything that I can say that changed. There was a couple laws that were changed, like domestic violence gave us the opportunity to arrest people even if the victim didn't want to. So they kind of helped guide us with that. But as far as policies, I can't really think of any. You're welcome.
Closing statements.
Well, I do appreciate the opportunity to come here, and as a committee, you have a huge obligation in front of you to narrow down the list of candidates to the top 5, and I hope that you use your heart and your intellect to make good decisions, and I do appreciate the fact that y'all gave us all the opportunity to interview. To the men and women of the Baton Rouge Police Department, I don't really want to talk about myself, I want to talk about them. You have the opportunity to have an administration change. You're going to have to open your hearts and minds and let the next chief, whoever it be, whether it be me or somebody else, let them come in and let them pave their own path and make sure that you give them every opportunity to be successful. To the community, I'll say this. If I'm elected chief of police, I've been through all the communities. I would tell my guys and girls to go out there and make friends in the community. Like I said, we have few eyes, you have many. So it's important that our officers utilize their skills and resources to help the community. And let's try to bring Baton Rouge. It's not complicated. Open lines of communication. Me and you have differences. Me and you have differences. We can talk. And look, we may never agree, but guess what? We can walk away friends and shake hands or pat each other or hug each other. So, I challenge y'all, I challenge the men and women of Baton Rouge City Police, and I challenge the community to let's bring everything together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen who are at home, we have now entered the public comment portion of our meeting. Is